Hi, today I'd like to talk about this Silvertone guitar that I picked up recently. Actually, I got it at a thrift store. I was kind of shocked to see it for I think I got paid like $25 for it, something like that. It was in pretty rough condition when I got it. It was pretty dirty, and the frets were all corroded, and the strings were all corroded, and the strings were mismatched, and it was in really just really nasty looking shape. Plus, the back had come loose as well, so it was dangling in several places and just kind of hanging on by a thread, so that needed to be repaired. But having said all that, it took a little while to do the cleanup, and which wasn't bad, and I got the finish looking pretty good, I think. Still got a little sheen on it, as you can see. And the neck cleaned up pretty good. The frets looked really good. Actually, what's cool about this as I was cleaning it up was a couple things. One was it has brass frets on it, which I thought was really cool. They're kind of probably not real robust, because you can tell where the person that was playing it before actually played this guitar for a while, I guess, and actually wore out some of the frets, have some divots in there, which I think is kind of cool that they actually played it. Plus, these tuners are actually brass as well, so I don't know if we can get a close-up of that, but there you go. So you can see those, I don't know if you can see that brass or not, but the brass frets. So as I was actually polishing those up, I just used some very fine grit sandpaper on a block, just to kind of clean things up. But I oiled the neck, and that turned out pretty good. And a couple other things. One I noticed is the nut there on the high E string is pretty much almost totally gone, but still grabbing the E string, so I'm just going to leave that as is. I think if I was planning on playing this very much, I definitely would want to replace that, because it's kind of precarious hanging off the edge there. It's a nice little guitar. It's some specs on these. So this is a Silvertone 605. They started around 1948, maybe 1949. I'm not quite clear when they actually released these or started selling these. I have a code on it. It was 4809, and then a K, and then 605. So it appears as if this was actually made by K Guitars. I've seen some other YouTube videos where they say it was maybe some other manufacturer, and that very well could have been the case. But apparently these were slapped together, and they were pretty cheap. They were about, I think the first year they were about $8.95 or something like that. And all the way up through the 50s, they kind of went up in price, maybe all the way up to like $15. So obviously these are pretty cheap guitars and meant for the masses, and a lot of people probably got their starts on a guitar like this. As far as the scale size, it's a parlor size or a 3/4 size guitar. The body is supposedly it's solid birch top with sides and back, solid all the way around. I don't think that's correct. I think the back is actually a laminate, and I wouldn't, since I really couldn't inspect the top real close, I think it might be a laminate as well, even though it says it's a solid birch top. That's some of the conflicting information you see on these things. So the neck is a solid maple. I have no reason to doubt that. It's a set neck. It's an ebonized fingerboard, which means stained. The dots are all painted on, and like I said, the little frets are brass. It's got a nitrocellulose lacquer finish, and these tuners are called Waverly style open gear tuners, which I guess that's just what the style is. And then the bridge is actually a hardwood bridge, floating bridge, and I think the nut might be similar too. And so it's actually that's a wooden nut, so I think that's kind of part of the problem with it holding up. So that might be something to, like I said, something to fix at some point. The body's about 4 inches thick, something like that, and it's about 36 inches long, something like that. So real light. So it feels pretty sturdy, especially after I put the back on. Before I had the back on, it was kind of slapping around back there, but it came together good, and we'll just go with that. So one thing I do notice is to play it, the action's a little high, which you would expect, but with thin strings, it's playable from a fingering perspective. Tuning is not the greatest on this. A couple things. One is it's got the floating bridge like that, and so you have to manually adjust that for intonation. Plus, these headstock, they call them Waverly tuners, or Waverly style tuners, and those are open, and they're pretty hard to turn. So that would be something, again, if you wanted to really play this very much, you'd want to replace that. But otherwise, I think the finish looks pretty good. Turned out nice. Basically, I just got the grunge off. Put a little Murphy's oil soap on there. You can see the sides. You know, it's got some dings and stuff. And where I replaced the, not replaced, but redid the back of this thing, I took it all off, kind of flattened it out. Some of the bracing in the back was actually, had moved around a little bit, so everything was, all the braces had become disconnected from the back, and only along the very sides here were still connected to the guitar. So that's totally been cleaned up. Got fresh wood on both surfaces, on both the edges and the bracing, and used a good quality wood glue to put this back together. And so it came together really nice. The only thing is just you can kind of see the crack where the repair, where the two sides were put back together. And I thought about maybe putting some vinyl pinstriping on there, like carved pinstriping, and I started to do that, and it just didn't do right, because there's still a little bit of a difference in height between where I glued it back and where the edge of the guitar is, so it slipped a little bit as I was clamping it down, and I didn't catch that when I was kind of getting things set up and clamped, so it actually shifted on me. So that's a learning if you ever do that. Putting the back on is really easy, but making sure it's like, you know, we're talking probably 1/10 of a millimeter, but you can feel that. So if you were doing it on an expensive guitar and you were a luthier, that what I did would not be acceptable in my mind. But for this purpose, it works just fine. So before I get to the sounds, I'd like to show a couple things. One is, this was the strap that came with it, that was on it. And I guess that's the original strap, so it was tied to the strap button at the bottom, down here, and it was tied around the neck up and through here. And I really hate that. Plus, this is not very comfortable to wear. I tried just putting it on with that strap, and that's not a comfortable thing. I might put it up here for display purposes, but I haven't decided what to do with that yet. And the other thing that really drew my eye to it at the thrift store was this case. And so when I saw that, it's like, oh my gosh, that's got to be from like the 50s. And it's got that cool kind of Western pattern on there, which I think is kind of fun for that. It's certainly a period piece if you want to think about it that way. The case is not in the greatest shape, but it's, you know, the guitar sat in that case for years. So so I'm actually going to keep this out and use this as part of my collection here in the office somewhere. All right, let's see how this guy does here. Okay, this is interesting. So I tuned this up yesterday to kind of get ready for this video. And a couple things. To tune it open, you can hear it's off a little bit. So when I got the tuning on the open strings really good, when I started playing chords, okay, they're out a little bit, but they were really out when I had all the strings to tune to just the open position. So this is going to be one of those guitars you're going to have to tune it to the chords you're going to be playing in, more or less, to make it sound all right. Little bit of, you can hear a little bit of fret buzz on that. Obviously, if you wanted to spend a lot of time and really work on this, there's no truss rod adjustment on here. So I guess the only adjustment you can make is the intonation down here, and you theoretically could raise or lower that bridge piece, you know, if you wanted to go through that kind of effort to do that. Intonation, I got the E string kind of, that's kind of close, but it really is hard when you get to. So they're kind of close, but I think that's kind of the nature of the beast with these kind of saddles, bridge saddles. So you just kind of have to get the best you can. Again, I think most people would have just played cowboy chords with these anyway. It sounds a little flat there, but with that nut being the way it is, it's probably sitting a little lower or a little different than it should, but it's still in the slot, so I guess it's actually the way it was supposed to be, but it's just precarious there. I wouldn't want to play something too hard. So it's not terrible as you move up the neck. Yeah, so it's not too bad. So for some reason, the fat of my finger wants to hit that E string. So when I'm playing this, I really got to watch my hand position. It's right there. So as far as the sound's concerned, actually it's kind of growing on me. When I first got it, it just sounded god awful because the strings were, I think the bottom three were original and the top three had been replaced with with like an extra D string for the G or something, and the two plain strings were totally, I think they were backwards on there. Like the thinner one was on the B string and the thicker one was on the E or something. So yeah, so it got some not good attention early on somewhere along the line. So anyway, that's what this guitar is about. I just wanted to share that. I think it's a cool piece. I really like just the aesthetic of it and just kind of the history of something like this when guitars were starting to become real popular to the masses. And if this is a 1948, I really feel privileged to have it. I can't guarantee that that's the date of this guitar. I see a lot of discrepancies from even different websites. I think there's a Silvertone site that talks about they came out in 49, or at least that was the earliest they had a catalog for. So, you know, take that for what it's worth. But anyway, so it's a pretty old guitar. There were some markings inside, and the one was that code with that, and I don't know that was the date on there, that 48, if that was actually the year, or if that was just some other numbering system they had at the time. There's supposed to be, and there's a barely faint date stamp, which, if it's on there and you can read it, that would actually give you the actual date apparently, or the actual month. But on this one, I really tried to, when I had the back off, I was looking at that and couldn't quite make out what the year was. I couldn't really make out anything. It was just a real light gray square that matches what the stamp is supposed to look like. You just couldn't read what's in there. So I think what I'm going to do is we're going to keep this guitar pretty much as a decorative piece and pull it down every now and just play around with it because it is kind of fun. So if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you really enjoyed it, please subscribe. And I'd like to thank you very much for watching.